In this video, we'll explore the paradox of the rule of choice, the rule of freedom, the fact that at some level, each of us can decide our identity, our pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. And at another level, 98% of us will choose to invest in and stand by a cascading series of choices that begin with indoctrination of our cult in childhood and often ends dying loyal to the cult. So the first injection of memes occurs between the infant and the giants that are our caregivers. And this injection takes place before conscious reason. So it's guaranteed to take hold. And it's the time when the cult, for better or worse, downloads. This is the way we talk. This is the way we eat. This is what we believe. This is what we value more than other things. This is who we are. This is our identity. This is us, and that is them. All of this gets downloaded and starts to take clear effect by age 6. Now, what's the force that's behind such an, it's an incredible force that creates this clone type dynamic. You can even take people from other nationalities, and if you travel the world, you will understand clearly that there is a definite cult identity that you can tell an Australian from an American. You can tell an American from a Thai. You can tell an Italian from a French person. So you can see these patterns. But if you take a French baby at 6 months old and raise them in a Thai family, that French baby will look and appear Thai in sound, in diet, in behavior. The body genes aren't going to change, but the memes are going to change. If you take a Thai girl at 6 months old and raise her in an Australian home, she's going to walk like an Aussie, talk like an Aussie, think like an Aussie. She's going to have an Aussie identity. And so what's compelling this 98, 99% adherence to the status quo of one's cult, despite the obvious kind of question mark, which emerges when we understand that every cult in human history has told its people, this is our way, it's the right way, you should do it our way, and that's why we do what we do. In the case of, say, an American cult, we take it one step further. We say it's the best way. We're number one. We don't usually go into details because, that might get a little bit shaky. Obviously we're number one in military spending, but are we number one in paid paternity leave? Are we number one in reducing trauma? Are we number one in ending homelessness of our own people? So it's easier just to leave it as we're number one. And just about everyone and everything is number one at something. If it's just number one at being your own name. So why is it when out of the 10,000 cults in human history that form the basis of every culture, that every one of those cults told their people that this was the right way, the only way to do things, until they were extinct? In other words, 95% of all cults and counting lie to their people because everyone just wants one thing. They want to intelligently survive. They want to experience more sustainable well-being and less unnecessary suffering. And the cult says, do it our way. Do this and you'll be happy, is the promise of the cult. But obviously, if those cults were correct, they'd still be around. And they're not. 95% of all cults are dead, which suggests that in another 10 or 20,000 years, 95% of what our cults are telling us will either be extinct or so radically changed that we can't recognize the difference. And if that's the case, if there's a 95% statistical probability that every single thing that we're doing today will be considered barbaric and absurd a few thousand years from now, and will be extinct in its current form, then why is it that children indoctrinate themselves, accept these memes without question as part of the status quo? And I think it's as basic as the fact that the giants that give birth to us, because to a 4-pound, 18-inch infant, the 200-pound, 6-foot-tall, caregivers, parents, are giants. The giants, by definition, are still alive. And if you want to survive and you don't have an intellect and you're coming into a new world, and the giants that gave birth to you are still alive, then there's a good chance that they know something. Not everything, maybe not highly competent, but they've obviously learned enough to stay alive for at least 20 years. And that is an accomplishment relative to dying at 6 months, etc. And so copying the status quo unquestionably for an infant is a reasonable bet given the uncertainty of the unknown. So every child adopts their cult. Every child starts eating and talking the way their parents do, start thinking, using language, going to school, etc. So this forms the initial indoctrination in which everything is laid out and given meaning. This is a good person. That's a bad person. This is someone we have contempt for. That's someone other than us. This is a cool person. Cool people are good in this cult. They're bad in this cult, but they're good in this cult. And so you have the law of mass, and you also have this record of success. Now, as you go into school, one of the things that is created, first of all, you have inertia. Once you've learned anything a certain way, it takes energy to unlearn it, and then more energy to learn something better. And it's not clear, it's not automatic, that if you unlearn something, that you're going to learn something better. If you unlearn riding a bicycle so that you can learn to drive a car, not that in that case you have to be one or the other, but if you unlearn chauvinism, for example, the idea that masculine energy is superior to feminine energy, that yang principles are superior to feminine principles, you have to think that through and unlearn it. And then you have to put something back in its place. And what's put back in its place has to deliver more sustainable well-being over time than what was removed, or your pain threshold goes up, and with it, a sense of failure. Because we all desire to feel sustainably better and avoid feeling chronically worse. So inertia means we don't have to examine and then rebuild anything. So it's efficient. But in school, particularly our system of education where you have 20 or 30 children to a teacher, if the more standardized that classroom can be, the easier it is for the teacher. Obviously, the teacher cannot teach 30 different curriculums to 30 different unique human beings in 30 different unique ways. And so the teacher rewards out of the logistics of scarcity created. See, because the entire school model itself creates scarcity. By choosing to teach children a large variety of subjects that have little or no relevance to daily life, nobody will pay for them. You can do your test where you rattle off what were the names of the bridges, passed by General Washington in 1874. It's like, let's see, was it was it the bridges? No, that was nobody's going to pay you any money, because whether you get the bridges right, whether you remember whether George Washington was born in 1874 or 1875, there's still no bread on the table. The windows still need cleaning. Now, if you learn to clean windows well, if you learn to bake bread, if you learn to drive a car, if you learn to help someone have a good grieving process when one of their relatives died or their fiance, they may well pay you because it's useful. And so when you create so many unuseful subjects to take up so many people's time, there's a certain amount of willingness to go along with that, the idea of getting an education. But there's also going to be, we're not going to bankrupt the country so that people can learn calculus. When's the last time you used algebra? It's not that they're bad skills. It's just we're not going to bankrupt the country tutoring and mentoring one-on-one. Recite the names of every American president in order and tell us the details of their biography. We're just not going to do it. And so rather than make the education curriculum more efficient, rather than make it more effective at preparing someone for life, our teenagers come out of high school and have no idea how to build a house, how to start a business, how to drive a car, how to cook great food. All the important things are just left out. What we do is we basically give, we allocate too many students for the teacher. In that scarcity created by this artificial phenomena called education, we then reward students that do what they're told and fit in and don't bother the teacher. Because the teacher will be bothered by your uniqueness, by your diversity, because they don't have enough time, they don't have enough bandwidth. And so they ask, beg, plead, punish the students, cajole the students into being and maintaining the norm. Sometimes with shame, sarcastic remarks at the child's expense. So in school, you have the inertia of copying, and peers also, sometimes bullies, etc., will target anyone who's different. Now, as you move into work, in a paradigm of capitalism where the goal of the company is to make money, and the goal of the boss is to make money, and your job as an employee is to help the boss make money. Well, again, if you are unique, if you're developing ideas, if you're pausing to think about things, you may not be very useful about, making money. And so don't question or rock the boat. Just be a professional in the way professionals are, which usually means don't have any personal feelings, don't bring any uniqueness about you to the job site, just fit in, be a clone, be professional. And so, again, the meme that you've learned at home, which has been indoctrinated by the cult, continues unquestioned. And then when you go to develop a romantic relationship, well, I'm a normal person, looking for a normal person. I was looking at OkCupid's profiles because one of the more important questions for an examined life is whether or not you want to fit into the norms or whether you want to examine and iterate the norm. And a very good question for that is, would you rather be normal or would you rather be weird or abnormal or a minority or diverse? Because the norm is not diverse. The norm is the status quo. It's whatever it is. And since I've done the analysis on every single one of our status quos, and they can all be iterated to be 10 times more intelligent than they are, I'd rather be weird, meaning I'd rather diverge from the norm. And I'm interested in a woman who wants to be intelligently different from the herd. However, the majority of women, even in San Francisco, answer this question that they would prefer to be normal, and they would prefer their partner to be normal. Then they would prefer to be abnormal, different, diverse, and would like their partner to be different and diverse. In other words, they're betting on mediocrity. Every norm is an average. It's a mediocre average that produces mediocre results. Now, if you want to meet your hierarchy of needs to survive, to feel secure, to have love and belonging, to have self-esteem, to develop your personal talents, to bring those talents abundantly and valuably in the world in a way that creates abundance for you and other people. And then finally, to become part of something bigger than yourself. If you want to do that, then you need the cooperation to a large extent of other people. We stand on the shoulders of giants. And if other people want normal people, want you to be normal, to cooperate with you, whether that's to have sex with you, to talk with you, to invite you to the party, if they want someone who's normal and want to avoid someone who is diverse, who is unique, then there's a pressure that combines. So there's the social, financial, psychological pressure combined with inertia, meaning you get rewarded if you do not, if you don't examine things and iterate them. And in a psychologically illiterate cult that emphasizes keeping busy, you can go and have your family pour all the chauvinism, racism, all the materialism, all the atheism, all the whatever it is they're pouring in. And this can just spill over unconsciously here, and spill over unconsciously here, and spill over unconsciously here. And then you die, as a relative clone of your parents because no one interrupted the cycle any step of the way. It was discouraged. You had to work harder to interrupt the cycle and then work even harder to iterate and imagine a new pattern. And the consequence of that was that you were more diverse. You deviated. See, there's even that word deviant. A deviant is someone who deviates. From what? From the norm. That's what the deviation is measured by, the majority. And the majority is always wrong. The majority in a bell curve of technology adoption is always behind the minority, the first few early adopters who invent and create a new technology. They are the deviants because they deviate from what 80% of people are doing at that moment in time, which is the old technology. Now, we talk about, if we look at what the curse words are, weird is tremendously critical. It's not viewed as a compliment in our cult to be weird. Number one. Number two, deviant, to deviate from the norm, is viewed with suspicion. Pervert, to pervert, to deviate. Again, misfits, different, too sensitive, to this, to that. So these deviations from the norm are incredibly important for evolution and species resilience. If you look at how ecologies are designed, nature likes to win and has been winning for 24 billion years, starting with the creation of everything out of nothing. It's a pretty big win. And what nature is constantly doing is iterating and creating unique this and unique this. We're not talking about phone colors, unique views, unique value hierarchies, because nature's bet is that if she creates one of everything, if she creates every type of human being imaginable, that some of them are going to survive, thrive, and win, and some of them won't. And nature says, I don't know which ones are going to be average, which ones are going to be amazing in a given environment, and which ones are going to lag behind and die off. So I'll just create them all. I don't know what the lucky number is, so I'll give every number under the sun. And one of them, a couple of them, are going to win. And those will go forward and create more life. Now, life, nature, doesn't know for sure which deviation, which mutation. A mutant is, again, often a dirty word. When you mutate, when you divide from the pack and end up, consequently, hopefully, in a different location, you are helping life pursue life's experiment, which is to try everything, see what works, and do more of that. And everything can be improved. But these tremendous social pressures out of the fear of the unknown, which we have to face if we change, we have to lose our identity. We have a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that we confuse and think that's me. No, it's a pattern that you've chosen and then allowed, and then are continuing, often unconsciously. It is a pattern. It's not you. You are the one who chooses whether to unconsciously follow the pattern or to change it. But we often confuse the pattern with ourselves, that we are the one who thinks this, feels this, does this, says this, and is like this. And so if we've confused ourselves with our patterns, when we change our patterns, we have to lose ourself. And when we lose ourself, we have to face the greatest fear of every traumatized human being, the fear of the unknown. And with the unknown, the fear of being out of control. And with the fear of being out of control, the fear of being re-traumatized in a helpless and terrified state. We have to face the fear of the unknown. We have to shift our identity. We have to jeopardize the cooperation of other people with our human needs in order to change our pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. We have to become less attractive to a majority of mates in the status quo in order to do something differently. And all we have to do to avoid all that risk is let nature evolve and iterate with someone else, stay loyal to the status quo, and die a clone. We are at choice. We're not just following orders. But it takes an effort to exercise will, to exercise choice, to break out of the current. And there is a machine in place in every cult that effectively keeps us busy so as not to examine the cracks, the insanity, the schizophrenia, the absurdity, the cruel and unnecessary abuse of its people. That is part of every one of the 10,000 cults in human history and is a very big part of our own.